The international break is over and the championship is back. It's time I tell you what we learnt from the weekend just gone in the second tier. Let's go. Before we start, I've got to tell you over 70% of the people that watch this podcast on a regular basis aren't yet subscribed. It's free to do so. If you do find value, that's the way of supporting the channel and leaving a like on the video too. In the comments down below, let me know how you reflect on your team's weekend back in the championship after what felt like a long time away. Let's start at Ellen Road as they hosted Burnley. Leeds 0, Burnley 1 was the final score. Let's start with the home side Leeds. Their XG was 1.24. I think the biggest thing we learnt about Leeds in this game is their struggles to break down a low block under Daniel Farke remained an issue and does need resolving quickly. I've watched back all 8 of Leeds' goal-scoring opportunities from their match at the weekend, and I think although there were a couple of chances that should have been converted, there's some screenshots of those on the screen now, some very similar images were being shown time and time again, and that's where the concern of mine does creep in. These are 2 moments in the first half where Burnley are sat comfortably in that low block, and we'll come on to that low block in just a second and praise it because look, it worked, an absolute treat. They knew their threat was going to come in transition. Now, we all watched Leeds against Sheffield Wednesday a few weeks ago and saw the mouth-watering threat when the ball was played quickly and the game's tempo was controlled by them. Often on Saturday, it felt quite passive and very quickly became predictable, making Burnley's job of defending the key zones in and around their box far easier. Just take a look at this screenshot as an example. Burnley are practically playing with a flat back 6 at this point, doubling up on every Leeds player in a dangerous position. All 10 of Burnley's outfield players are either in line or behind the ball at this moment, forcing Leeds to play in instead of through. To further emphasise the point, this is the momentum graph from the game, and although there is plenty of green, it's the height of the bars that are the biggest concern from a Leeds point of view. Essentially, only for a 30-minute spell in the second half were they piling on more dangerous pressure with slightly better chances to show for it. Leeds had 71% possession in this game. They remain the team with the most amount of the ball so far this season, yet they're 10th for goals per 90. So that got me thinking, what's the passing situation? I wanted to look at the passes into the final third to get a better idea of where exactly the biggest struggle currently is, and they actually have the highest percentage of final third passes completed in the division, with 76% successfully being received in the attacking zones of the pitch. However, when it comes to touches inside the opposition box, Leeds are 8th. So when you look at the number and the direction of those passes they're making, to have 7 teams above them in that metric, that is a bit of a concern for me. So reaching the creative zones is not the problem. It's what comes next that's causing the biggest frustration for Leeds United fans, because when the first opportunities can't be carved open to a high degree of threat over the opposition, it feels like it could be a long afternoon ahead. Burnley, their XG was 0.66, and when it comes to them, I think it's been 2 years of very different football, and it's clear Scott Parker is focusing on the organisation of his team against the ball, especially against specific opposition. It's become very, very clear that people are keen to jump on Scott Parker when results don't look pretty, but context is important. They've dropped points against 2 teams this season, and both of which have come in the heat of an unprecedented mass exodus of important players. In the games when things have looked quieter off the pitch, Scott Parker has created and seen fantastic results in a game plan being executed well. And Saturday was another example of that. Now, trying to visualise an approach centred around out of possession work rate is tough, but I think I've found something. This screenshot is Ampadu driving through the middle of the pitch, about to send a through ball to Willie Gnonto with a 5v4 in favour of Leeds United. And as we know, pace and room to exploit is where Leeds are most dangerous. Now, this second screenshot is 11 seconds later. The ball to Gnonto was slowed down brilliantly from the tracking of Josh Laurent, and suddenly Gnonto is surrounded by 4 Burnley players. The speed and awareness to reshape and reorganise is phenomenal and made it so difficult for Leeds to create a consistent number of good chances in dangerous areas of the pitch. Now, for Burnley, conceding possession is not an issue. In fact, at times, I think it's encouraged by Scott Parker. It was the same against Cardiff and to an extent Luton on the opening day. They trust their abilities defensively and know they can cause threats on the turnover. And their goal on Saturday came from exactly that, being fantastic defensively and being snappy and direct in transition. They sit third bottom for touches inside the opposition box, yet they've scored the joint highest number of breakaway goals and have the best conversion rate in the Championship so far. Their identity is clear, and the execution from Scott Parker's team, people won't want to say it, but it's been second to none. Plymouth 3, Sunderland 2. Let's start with the winning side. Plymouth, their XG is 1.76. And the biggest thing we learn about Plymouth in this game is their second half improvement is evidence that this team, coached by this manager, can cause a problem. They beat a team that have been brilliant since the first game of the season, and that must be credited. Take a look at the graph in front of you. It shows a much stronger intent for Plymouth after half-time. Not just gaining some much-needed control in the match, but also purposeful threat. It's been clear Wayne Rooney has been looking to make some stylistic changes, especially when it comes to the way that Plymouth use the ball in a different way. And for the first time at the weekend, I think we saw a few of those bits and pieces come together. The question now is, though, is this a convincer type of performance for not just the fans, but also the players too? And what I mean by that is this some sort of evidence that a team managed by Wayne Rooney can provide successful output? We can't answer that now straight away, but I think this is a small step closer to reaching some sort of conclusion. The word that comes to mind straight away, though, is consistency, and that's for both result and performance too, because quite frankly, even this game, and we will continue to praise this performance from Plymouth, the two halves in this match were night and day. So not just being consistent with the final performance and the final result, but within matches as well. Now, what I'm about to say initially might sound quite nerdy, but stick with me. I understand XG is not for everyone, but I think it can tell us something. For the first time this season, Plymouth actually conceded less expected goals than their opposition. It was close, that's true, but the open play metric against is much smaller than what it has been. The shot map looks healthier with threatening efforts in much better areas of the pitch, with more passes in the opposition half for the first time this season. And we've been saying this from the start. I think when you're working with a squad that respectfully isn't as strong as some of the others, being hard to break down and being hard to beat is crucial. We've seen Plymouth do different things with the ball since Wayne Rooney has been appointed, but inside both boxes, the issues have been glaring and there's been plenty of criticism surrounding that part of their game. However, against Sunderland, I think both aspects were much better, with far more conviction and better decision-making in exactly what they were doing. So fair play Plymouth, fair play Wayne Rooney. Not many people saw this result coming, and they executed that second half in particular fantastically well. As for Sunderland, their XG was 1.75. I think the biggest takeaway is to take a breath and trust the people that have pretty much got every decision right in the first 4.5 games of the season. Look, the second half was really poor, partly down to Plymouth intensity shifting brilliantly, but something wasn't quite right after the break. The fluidity, the decision making, the individual errors, it did have a bit of a disjointed feel to it. But just like we've been praising them during the great times, this is a young group with plenty to learn. If they were the finished article, they wouldn't be playing in the Championship. And that's no disrespect to Sunderland, a fantastic football club. These players, if they were the finished product, would not be playing in the second tier of the English pyramid. That's just a fact. Development is all about time and being able to learn and navigate yourself through difficult points. I think that defeat yesterday, on Saturday, was just an example of that. The players will learn. The manager will learn as well, because he's new to this division, and they'll know if their high standards slip again, they will be punished. At Fratton Park, it finishes Pompey 0, West Brom 3. It's time. Let's talk about Portsmouth, because some things aren't quite right, and it's time we chat about it. Their XG was 0.7, and that's the only number and statistic and graphic I'm going to throw at you, because we're going to go off the cuff a little bit and run through some notes I've written down, because I think on this channel over the last year or so, we've had some really positive discussions about Pompey, and they had to be positive because they were so good, and I've been really enjoying the chat with those supporters. However, when things aren't looking so pretty, it's just as important we talk through them as well. So get involved, Pompey fans. I want to hear what you've got to say in the comments down below. Now, the first thing I'm going to say might surprise a few Pompey fans. Let me know in the comments down below. But it's something that is important, and I should say straight away. And that's the points return isn't my main concern. In fact, I don't think the points return is a big concern for me whatsoever, because there have been many factors that have made it more difficult than what it could have been for Pompey to pick up some early points after 12 years away from the Championship. But I'm going to use the word identity. And it's a scary word sometimes, because at the moment I'm not quite sure what a Portsmouth team managed by John Messina in the Championship looks like. And again, I get it. There's a lot of reasons as to why that might be. Has it been a disastrous start? Let's go back to a points return. They've got 3 points. Has it been a disastrous start? No, I don't think it has been, because they've picked up some important draws away from home and at home too against a recently relegated Luton Town side. Have all the good bits looked sustainable? Not entirely. And that's probably where my first issue comes into it, because the Leeds game was crazy and could have gone anywhere. The Luton game was weird. I actually thought the red card for Luton hindered the way that Pompey could play that game, because they almost shut up shop the away side, didn't they, in that one? And it looked like a really weird affair. It looked like in the first sort of 30, 40 minutes of that match, it had something about it, and then fizzled out. It was tough for both teams, but especially Pompey looking to exploit the fact that their opposition had a man down. And like I said a few weeks ago, when they got a point against Middlesbrough away and they got a point at Ellen Road, I'm not going to contradict myself. I said at the time, taking full advantage of split-second moments is great, and they are one of the best sides I've ever seen at doing that. But they won't come in every game, those split-second moments, and they won't always come at the right time. And that's not me being patronising. And the only way I could describe it, and I sort of, as I was writing this down and putting a few notes together, and bear with me, this is a really off-the-cuff discussion about Portsmouth, because it's time we talk about them and have a little chat about it. I understand it's not the positive chat that I've had multiple times about this football club, but like I said right at the beginning, it's important to look at the pros and the cons during what will be a long season where so much changes. The only way I can describe it is like a heart rate monitor. Stay with me. And the games at the moment are making this monitor go a little bit crazy. The lines are up and down. It's making a really annoying beeping sound. It's ringing in your ear. It's really loud. And nobody quite knows what's going on. It's very, very intense. Things are happening so quickly. It's sort of being thrown at you. And you're just trying to control a few things. And at the moment, you're just a bit behind. And it's all things in your control and out of your control just aren't right at the moment. And you're so used to it being right. They just are crying out for a bit of stabilisation, a bit of control. And that's not control in games. I mean, brilliant if you can do that. But down to the opposition you're playing, that's not that's not easy. That's the challenge that you're facing. But they're crying out for a bit of stabilisation. Can you get some more players back? And when I mean that, I don't mean Josh Murphy coming into the starting 11 against West Brom. I mean getting a run of games going, because he's clearly not match fit. Regan Paul came on, that's a great positive. He's not going to be match fit. Players like that, key players that can lift the team through performance. Can you be better in larger patches of certain games? I thought there were glimpses of positives against West Brom. The press, the intense press in that first half was good. It changed in the second half and the game sort of ran away from you. I mean, conceding so early in both halves was a massive reason why that was. It was difficult. You were always chasing, always on the back foot. And that's when I come back to my dodge analogy about the monitor. You're always reacting. It's reactive, not proactive. And for so long, a John Massinio team at Portsmouth have been proactive. And at the moment, it's not. So dealing with that is a challenge. Can you start looking at a settled back four? I said that after Oxford were beaten by Blackburn on one of my key takeaway tweets. I said, when Oxford do have a settled back four, it will look much better. It will look easier for those players. And that's the same with Pompey. Again, it's not easy when you've got a lot of players that haven't been available. Can the attack then start growing some fluidity and consistent patterns? That comes with players coming back, gaining match fitness, and just having a bit of a boost. Now, injuries have been an issue, and I'm not going to shy away from that. On paper, it's been a very, very tricky start, and the games and the teams you're facing, look, it's been a really quite brutal, eye-opening start to the season, but you don't want to be asking questions about identity and approach for too long in the Championship, because before you know it, it can get pretty brutal. I think already, Pompey fans, when you're watching those games, you're seeing how quickly the games are being played, how quickly the other teams are punishing you for your mistakes. If you switch off in the first minute against League One, you probably get away with it. You switch off in the first minute and Conor Ogilvie sees that ball go over his shoulder and he's chasing in the Championship, you're gonna get punished, and you were punished yesterday by West Brom for switching off in that moment and then switching off again in that second half, in the early part of that second half. So those are things you're going to learn, and it's all a bit of a learning curve, and it's all a bigger learning curve when you haven't played in that league for a very, very long time. And things have been not easy, but very, very different in League One. I've seen that, and that's not me rubbing it in. Oxford have got more points. It's truly not. But even in games that we've won and the games that we've lost, there's been some pretty humbling moments in those matches where you go, crikey, that didn't happen in League One, and you would get away with that normally at that level. A back pass from Vil Volks that meant that Coventry won in the last minute. That doesn't normally get punished like that because a team isn't going like that at that moment in the match. It's also important to note that John Massinio, other than a few games around the Christmas period, has never really had to navigate through a tough period. Not just as a Pompey manager, that being said, also as a manager at all. You have to remember, although it feels like John Massinio has been a manager for a long time because of a fantastic achievement that he was the leader of last season, he hasn't been a manager for a very long time, and he's still learning too. So He'll have to move through this with his coaching team and with the experienced coaching team. John Harley is one of them. You have to sort of bounce off that experience that everybody's been involved in to try and navigate through what at the moment, no doubt, is a tricky period, and he will do that. And he'll have to sort of turn to those people that have been there before, even turn to the players that have done it before as well. However, when we're on the topic of John Mousinho, I do have a few things about team selection. And although there's a lot of uncontrollables that are making it difficult for Pompey at the moment, there are a few things I'm not quite sure about. The first one is Dazelle. He's not a player that should be playing in the middle, I think, for Pompey at this moment in time. I wasn't totally sold on the signing when he came in. He's not really a player that I'd associate with a Portsmouth outfit. I think he's good on the ball at times. I think his passing ability is good progressively at times. I don't think he's that man in a double pivot when you're against it, next to Marlon Pack. There's better options in that squad. Freddie Potts is a far better option. Kamara, I don't know too much about him, I'll be honest, but from looking at him briefly and from looking at what people had to say when he was playing abroad, I think they have to start the next game. One of those two. Freddie Potts was fantastic at doing that for Wickham. He's a progressive 6. He can play as an 8-2. Kamara, similar. He can do both of those things. He's a ball carrier. He's a progressor. They're better than Dazelle, I think, personally, in the role that you're looking to fill. And those are things you can control. And I'm quite surprised he hasn't done that sooner, especially now when both are fit or on the bench. Now, where is Conor Shaughnessy? That's just an open question. I'm intrigued to know what's going on there, because that leadership and the spine that was built from Shaughnessy, let's be honest, Will Norris in goal, Shaughnessy at centre-half, Monopack in the middle, and obviously out of your control, Colby Bishop not being available at the moment. But that was a clear spine all the way through, and then you had the threat of Kamara and Lane out wide. And look, I could go through the entire team, but that whole spine from back to front was there. And Conor Shaughnessy was a real key part of that. He was a leader through performance, and that can't be unnoticed. Even a threat from set pieces, if we're looking at it from a footballing perspective solely, he's an absolute threat from set pieces. And at games where you're not going to dominate every moment, and you're not going to be dominating the ball and creating numerous chances time and time again, having a bit of respite and being a threat from set pieces just doesn't go amiss. And I think that's what Conor Shaughnessy was good at too. He's brilliant at set pieces. I mean, he scored probably the best set piece or the most important set piece he will ever score in his career. And him not being around, whether that be injury, whether that be just purely a selection decision, I think is quite bizarre. And I'd be intrigued to see what you've got to say on that, Pompey fans. And is he fit? Is he coming back? Because he was a key part of last season. And having a consistent spine that of all the players that can turn to the body of work from the previous season. And Conor Shaughnessy was such a key part of that. And he can turn to what was so good about last season and provide that to the players that might be lacking a little bit of confidence with their last season. And of course, the new players that weren't there last season. So having that is also important too. We all saw how strong that Pompey team looked at the back, and that stability comes from that strength they've got defensively. As for West Brom, I'm not forgetting you. I want to do a whole video on your start to the season and the magic of Carlos Corberán so soon. So don't worry, that's coming, and I'm not forgetting you, but I do want to do a whole video on West Bromwich Albion because you've been phenomenal and were fantastic in that game against Pompey as well. So don't worry, West Brom fans, there's a video coming out very, very soon based on your start to the season and how fantastic you've been. Take care.